Welcome to Phillip Island, Victoria in Australia. What a setting we have for this great sporting contest, the Little Penguin Sea to Dune race. Nervous moments always as they gather on the beach, the tension mounting, and away they go. There's the defending champion, wearing his familiar navy blue and white, great waddling style. Another pre-race favourite though, losing touch with the pack. Maybe that's why. A few too many fish in the day's feeding. There's a familiar face, Skip McIntyre, 8 times a champion back in the 90s, a very successful coach now, keeping a keen eye on proceedings. This the leading group, one or two still able to put on a show for the camera, others just ploughing straight over it. Some resorting to shortcuts. Sad that cheating has crept into this beautiful sport. The judges will have a look at that. But up at the front, the pace is relentless, closing in on those sand dunes that will offer a bed for the night. The fatigue starting to tell. Who's got the finishing kick up on the outside? What a turn of pace from that one, whichever one it is. No answer from the rest, and he takes victory. What a win. There we are, into the Burrow, building an extension with his winnings, and back tomorrow to try and defend his title here on Phillip Island.
Good evening everyone and welcome to Live Penguin TV. My name's Megan and I'm going to be your host tonight as we watch the world's smallest species of penguin, our little penguin, coming out of the water, crossing the beach and heading back to their burrows here on Phillip Island in Victoria, Australia. Tonight I'm joined by Sue. Sue, come on in and tell us what you'll be doing tonight.
Hello everyone. It's nice to be here tonight with you and Megan. What I'll be doing tonight is reading through some of your lovely comments and questions and we'll endeavour to answer some if we're able to.
We'll do our best.
Yeah.
Nothing too hard. No, I'm joking. Send us your hardest questions. We'll do our best. I know some people don't like questions they don't like the answer to, but I don't mind it. It makes you think about things. We'll try to figure it out, and if all else fails, we'll Google it. No, we'll look at scientific papers and we'll try and find the answer for you if we can't answer any of your questions tonight. But send through all of your questions. Sue will be passing them through to me throughout the night to answer as best as I can. If there's anything we haven't talked about, if you watch regularly or if you're a new watcher and you want to know the basics, please ask us if there's anything we haven't mentioned that you want to know. Send it through on Facebook or YouTube. Now, we are joining you from Phillip Island, which is also known as Milau. And I would like to say Warumjik to Milau, which means welcome to Phillip Island in the language of the Bunurong. And the Bunurong were the first people here on Milau, and they've been coming here for thousands of years before European settlement. They would come here in spring and summer to feed on short-tailed shearwater birds and shellfish all around this beautiful island, and they would have been the first people seeing penguins here on Phillip Island. So I would like to acknowledge the Bunurong and their elders past, present and emerging as the traditional custodians of the land that we're joining you from tonight. And let us know where you're joining us from tonight. If you know the traditional custodians of that land, even better, pop that in the comments. Let us know where you are. Let us know whose land you're on. Yeah, you may even be on Boonwurrung land, just like us if you're here in Victoria, or you might be joining us from somewhere else around the world, from the UK maybe, from America, from Asia. We know we have people watching from all over, which is just fantastic that we can bring the little penguins to you all for just a little bit longer. Now, you might have noticed that there is one penguin who's arrived a little bit early, ahead of all its friends, all alone down here on the beach. Let's zoom in and see what this little guy's doing. He's probably regretting coming in by himself, because look at that mountain of seaweed that our penguins have to traverse tonight on their journey home. As if it wasn't difficult enough and stressful enough for them running across the beach to get back to their burrows, they have to scale a mountain of seaweed. So this is the most scary part of the penguins' night, this dangerous dash across the beach to get back to their burrows. So this penguin, he's not quite sure. He's going to be really brave if he wants to cross by himself, because usually the penguins will be forming groups. So most penguins right now, and I might zoom out a little bit so we can see if any are on their way, they would be just offshore here, and for the last couple of hours they've been out there forming groups that we call rafts. So they look a bit like a black line on the surface, and I haven't been able to spot any just yet. So maybe we'll zoom out and we'll try and keep an eye out. We know where that little penguin is, down there. Ooh, sorry, I'll try and focus. And we'll keep an eye out for some of these penguin friends, but they'll be forming those groups and they'll be talking to each other. So they'll be calling out, forming those groups, and the way they communicate in the water is by using a sound that we call a huck. So they'll be going huck, 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 and that's the penguins talking to each other, forming those groups, gathering up, getting ready to come ashore. And they'll come ashore depending on where they live. So they come to the same area of beach to cross the same part, back to the same spot each time they come back usually. So these penguins coming in, they know exactly where they're going, and they're forming groups with penguins that live in the same area, getting ready to come ashore. And they form those groups for safety in numbers, because as they're crossing the beach, these penguins, they are the smallest species of penguin. That's why they're called little penguins. They're only about a foot tall, about the size of a ruler. So they are quite vulnerable to big birds of prey. Things like Pacific gulls, sea eagles, swamp harriers, they might want to make a little penguin into a snack. So that's why they form those groups, for safety in numbers. And they're also waiting until it gets a little bit darker, most of them are anyway, because that's when those birds of prey can't see to hunt, and that's when it's safest for the penguins to cross the beach. Now, our penguins came in at 8:08 last night. So tonight they're keeping us waiting. This happened to me last time I did this stream as well. I thought, oh yeah, they're going to come in early like they have been, but they're keeping me waiting. They're keeping us all waiting. They don't have little penguin watches that they check to see what time they come in. They're just looking at the horizon up where our camera is, waiting till they feel safe. So it's not very cloudy tonight. The tide's a little bit further out, so the penguins might be feeling a little bit more cautious crossing the beach. So it does change each day, the time that they decide to come out. And sometimes they do keep us waiting. Where did that penguin go? Maybe he's in the seaweed trying to make its way over. We'll keep our eyes peeled for any more penguins along the beach. I might zoom out and we'll see if there's penguins anywhere else. And you might have noticed that bright light out at sea. There is a boat out there doing some fishing, which hopefully shouldn't impact on the penguins. But we'll have a bit of a scroll across the beach and see if there's penguins anywhere else, because there are 5 main pathways along this beach, and this is Summerlands Beach that we are looking at. And if you do come to visit us, you can be sitting at any of these points along the beach. We have our general viewing, our guided ranger tours, and the part of beach we're watching right most of the night is down at Penguins Plus. So we are Phillip Island Nature Parks, and we are loving having people back here with us watching the penguins. So we do encourage you, if you are able, to come and visit us. It's incredible that we're able to watch the penguins on Live Penguin TV, but it is definitely another experience being out there in the penguin colony, hearing them hucking away, chatting to each other, smelling that fragrant smell of penguin poo. It's a bit of a fishy smell. It's an experience for your senses. So we do loving having everyone back here, and we don't just manage the penguin parade. Phillip Island Nature Parks. Interrupted by the penguins. See you later.
Just had a message from Ranger Ebony tonight, who's counting, to say, yep,
We have penguins. Great. There we go. Fantastic. So yes, we do manage our koala reserve, Churchill Island and Nobby Centre, and many of our beautiful beaches, wetlands and woodlands all around the island. So if you do come and visit us and you buy a ticket, that money goes back towards conservation, research and education. And if you can't come join us, you can help us out by donating to the Penguin Foundation, adopting a penguin, adopting a bandicoot, a seal. You can adopt many of our beautiful animals here on Phillip Island to help protect and conserve them. And where have our penguins gone? They're behind the mountain of seaweed, which is going to make it tricky tonight for Ebony, who is counting the penguins. I guess you'll have to wait till they get over the seaweed to count them. If you guys want, you can have a go at counting the penguins like we do every night once they get more than halfway across the beach. So if you were tuning in last night to Live Penguin TV, final chance to put in your guesses as to how many penguins you think came in last night, because I believe Sue has a magic number for us. Sue, how many penguins did we have last night?
Yes, so last night's magic number was 1,130 penguins.
1,130. That's pretty good for this time of year. So at the moment, our penguins are kind of finishing up their breeding. There are still a few little chicks running around looking for mum and dad, but most of our penguins right now are getting ready or have currently undertaken or have just finished their annual molt. So our little penguins have very special feathers that help them survive out at sea. So they're completely waterproof on the outside. All their feathers interlock together, so they can't lose and replace those feathers gradually like other birds. So they have to undergo what we call a catastrophic molt. They have to spend about 3 weeks here on land, losing and replacing all of their feathers. So through that time, they can't eat, they can't go out to sea to fish, so they're fasting here on land. So keep your eyes peeled for some really chunky penguins. They will usually be more than double their body weight when they're getting ready for the molt. So you might see some penguins that are so fat that they can barely walk. They might be lying on the sand, pulling themselves along with their flippers and their feet, and looking generally uncomfortable because they're a lot bigger than usual. They have their, there's some more penguins. They'll have their second set of feathers pushing through, pushing out the old feathers. Oh, and is that the same group that have snuck over there? It's very hard to tell where the penguins are in this seaweed. I'll zoom out a little bit and we'll try and keep our eyes peeled across the great wall of seaweed. There's some penguins to the left and some to the right. We'll try and see which ones cross first. They're not making it easy for poor Ebony tonight. Trying to keep track of these penguins and to count them is not going to be easy, especially because it's a little bit misty out there. It's been a bit of a sea mist all day today, which is making it a little bit harder for us to see, a little bit harder to focus on the penguins as they're crossing. And the tide has washed out a lot of sand. So we do have a lot of rocks on the beach, which it might look like it's a little bit difficult for the penguins clambering through the rocks, but they actually quite like the rocks because it gives them a bit of added camouflage. So we can see them quite clearly with their little white bellies right now. There's the bigger group. But in the rocks and in the seaweed, if they get a fright, if a bird flies overhead and they feel threatened, they might not have to run back in the water. They might just lie down, hunker down and pretend to be a rock or a bit of seaweed. And there we go. They've kind of crested the wall of seaweed. Let's see if we can spot them. They're going to tumble down the edge. Oh, focus please, camera. There we go. It's a little flood of penguins going over the wall there, making their way over onto the beach. This is probably where you want to start counting them. as they get across that nice little bit of sand, and they're probably going to be a little bit more in a hurry because this is where they're going to be a bit more vulnerable going across that sand. They'll run up to these rocks and then they should feel safe and have a bit of a rest, because some of these penguins will have a long way to walk. Some of them might have to walk up to 2 kilometers to get home. So after that dash across the beach, and quite a bit of beach tonight, I don't blame them for wanting to stop and have a little bit of a rest. But now that I said they'll have a rest, they probably won't. Let's see what they do. And while we're watching this group come up, Sue, do we have any questions?
So this is an interesting one, Megan. I'm not sure you would have had this one before.
Oh, okay.
So Kaylee was wondering, when swimming in rafts, do they use energy-saving methods like when geese fly in V formation?
Interesting. I don't think so, because when the water is quite flat, we can see them swimming in, and I don't think I've ever seen them using any type of formation.
No,
you don't think so either?
no.
So yeah, I think the thing they do that probably saves energy the most is that they kind of surf the waves. They like to use the waves to help push them in further when they're coming in a raft onto land. But other than that, they're just kind of sitting on the surface, bobbing along, looking at the horizon, so with their heads out, and that's why we can see them more when they're out there waiting to come ashore, because not only are they in a big group, but they're looking at us, which they aren't when they're out fishing. They're looking, probably most of the time, looking down, looking for food. But when they're out in their rafts, they're looking at us, they're on the surface, so they're a lot easier to see. But I don't believe they have any formation. Penguins aren't very organised in their rafts. They don't have a leader. There's no one penguin who's in charge of organising the group. So I don't think they really have any specific way to save energy. They're thinking more about their safety than conserving energy is my belief anyway. But I don't know for sure. That's not something we've ever looked at or that anyone's ever asked before. So that's a very interesting one. Thank you, Kaylee. Oh, and there's more penguins coming in. These guys must have had a bit more trouble getting over that bit of seaweed. And if you are one of our regular watchers and wattle watchers and you watch night after night, you would see how much this beach changes. One night we might have had a high tide washing a bunch of sand. Some nights you might not be able to see the beach because the tide is so high. And then sometimes all the sand washes away and we have those rocks. So it's constantly changing for these penguins. So they have to be quite adaptable. They're always looking for the same landmarks to try and find their way, but they do have to be a little bit flexible when they're crossing the beach. So they might come up to the seaweed and be, oh, what's going on here? But they'll always figure it out. So there's no need for us to go out and intervene and move the seaweed. The penguins have been doing this. Oh, there's some on the highway that I always almost miss. Let me zoom around. The penguins have been doing this their whole lives, so they know, what am I doing? There we go. They know exactly what they're doing. They don't need our help to go about their daily business. They're wild animals. We're just here to watch them. So if a bunch of seaweed washes in, that's what the penguins have to maneuver over that night. Now, penguins here at the Summerland Beach, they actually have it quite easy. If you visit some other areas of our penguin colony, we have penguins who live up the top of sheer cliffs. I'll go back to the highway. Sorry, there's some more coming along. And they just make little pathways up the cliffs. There's penguins that live near the city and they live on a wall of rocks. There's penguins that live in all kinds of places. So these guys actually don't have it too hard walking across that nice sandy beach, even if sometimes it's a little bit rocky. They usually manage quite well, and they might look tiny and they might look like they're struggling, but even though they're better out at sea, they're definitely a lot quicker, more agile, a lot more graceful. They're not too bad when they're on land. They can be surprisingly quick. We often get asked how quick a penguin can move, and it's a lot quicker than you think. Like if you want to try and catch a penguin on land, if it's injured or it needs your help, even an injured penguin can move quite quick and you'll have to run to catch up to it if you let it get that far. And even though they do have fused knees, which gives them that funny little waddle, they have a really low center of gravity, which gives them really good balance, and they can jump about their own body height if they need to. They can jump quite high, and they can keep their balance quite well. And here's a good example of the difference between a penguin getting ready for molt and some penguins that may finish their molt or may still be feeding chicks. So it looks like some of these penguins are teeny tiny, but it's that these penguins, particularly the ones on the left-hand corner here, are gigantic. They are, I prefer to call them little penguin bodybuilders because they're not fat. They're putting on their weight in muscle, getting ready for that molt, metabolizing that fat to help them last that 2 to 3 weeks on land. So any little skinny penguins like this one here, they're definitely a bit quicker, but they may have already finished their molt. So we did have some penguins starting their molt really early if they've finished breeding. There's nothing stopping them from starting their molt early in the season, getting ready for winter, getting those nice new feathers, because it's getting a little bit late now to be molting. So any penguins that are molting now might want to get a wriggle on because it's starting to get cooler. The days are starting to get shorter. They want to make sure that they're ready with those nice new feathers to spend a lot longer out at sea. So we will start to see probably penguin numbers starting to decrease as our penguins finish up their molt, and they have to head out to sea for a lot longer in winter. Food is further away. They might be spending weeks or up to a month out in the ocean, traveling hundreds of kilometers from here to find food. I'm just following this big chunky penguin because he's such a good weight. It's so good to see. Even though they're late molters, there must still be plenty of food out there for them, which is fantastic. And I love how each penguin kind of has its own little individual waddle. They kind of have different personalities, different ways they walk. Some of them kind of puff their chest out and walk with a bit of attitude. Some of them are a little bit more unsure of themselves. They might lean forward and move really quickly if they're a little bit more skittish. I'll go back to the beach. I think I've lost those guys. Actually, I might go to the highway because they're coming around the corner. There we go. While we're waiting for these guys to come around along the highway, do we have another question, Sue?
Okay. This is another interesting one. I hope this doesn't stump you too much.
So there's one of our, I believe we refer to them as highway bandits. That little chick that's come down onto the highway to look for mum and dad. Sorry, Sue, you were interrupted by a penguin chick.
Okay.
What was the question?
I like that name, the highway bandits.
Yeah,
it's a good one.
It's really clever. I like that too.
Okay, another tricky one for you, Megan.
Okay,
but
I'll
we know that
I'll
you
do
know
my
lots.
best.
So.
Oh, thanks, Sue. You have faith
do
in me.
penguins have taste buds?
Oh, I feel like I actually have looked into this one. Do penguins have taste buds? They do. They do have taste buds, but they don't have sweet taste buds. They have salty, bitter, and umami, I think. Are you Googling it, Sue? We have had that one before, and I'm pretty sure they have taste buds, but they don't taste sweetness, which makes sense. They eat fish, so they don't need to be able to taste sweet things. There we go. They can taste sour and salty. So I was pretty much right.
Very good. Yeah, very good.
Is that right?
Yeah.
Thanks, Sue, for just double checking, because I quite often think that I know things, and I like to double check just to make sure if I can't remember where I learned something from. But
It says they also have receptors for detecting bitter and or meaty flavours.
There you go. I think meaty is what it gets called umami. It's kind of like a Vegemite.
That's it.
Vegemite taste. Yeah. I'll go back. Yeah, that's an interesting one.
That was good. That helps.
Yeah.
Tricky questions help me learn too.
Definitely. And even if we had it before, if we hardly ever get asked it, we struggle to remember. We'll look it up and then we won't think about it for months. So it's great when you guys ask us these things. Yeah, definitely don't get asked things like that very often. So it's great to see your knowledge and passion for penguins growing. The more that people watch live penguin TV and learn about our penguins, the more we start thinking about them and kind of comparing them to ourselves. So it's kind of seeing how is a penguin different to us, trying to put yourself in the shoes or the flippers of a penguin, trying to imagine what it might be like. So I can't imagine not being able to taste sweet. I definitely have a sweet tooth. But I guess, yeah, if you're only eating fish, you don't need to taste sweet things. It looks like these penguins are going to go up the hill. So not all of our penguins that come across the beach down here at the Penguin Parade actually live here at the Penguin Parade. These ones that go up the hill, and they are powering up the hill, they actually live up in the old housing estate. So they'll go up here, they cross the road, and we do have all the roads closed off after sunset to protect these little guys as they head up and across the road to get back to their burrows. So in our whole penguin colony, we have about 32,000 little penguins. So certainly not all of them live here. Only about 10% of our penguin colony lives here at the Penguin Parade. Now let's go back to the beach. And I'll switch over to the Penguin Highway. We have a few more penguins coming along here. Let's see, where did the highway bandits go? Oh, you're not going to chase after these guys? And there, it looks like there's only one. So I haven't been keeping an eye on these guys, but the other chick may have fledged. I'm not sure how fluffy it was, but something we definitely learnt. Oh no, I went too far with the other camera. Something we learnt with little Bluey, that some of you might have been watching on our penguin burrow camera. Bluey fledged when it still looked like he was quite fluffy. But Paula, one of our research officers, was telling us that they don't have to lose all their fluff. Oops, where did he go? Sorry, we're just looking at a blank screen. There he is. They can actually waterproof their new adult feathers underneath the fluff so they can get ready to fledge before they lose the last of their baby fluff. So this little highway bandit could definitely have his blue feathers underneath the fluff and might even venture out before the last bit of fluff is gone. Speaking of our burrow camera, I haven't had a look at it in a while. Let's have a bit of a peek inside. Oh, no one's home. No. Bluey's been gone for a while. His mum and dad are probably out fattening up, getting ready to molt, and they may not necessarily come back to this burrow. The molting penguins don't always like to constrain themselves to a burrow because they can get really hot when they're stuck in there all day. They do like to hang out underneath boardwalks, underneath vegetation. So this time of year is actually a really good time of year to visit the Nobby Centre or the Penguin Parade during the day and have a bit of a peek underneath the steps, underneath the boardwalks, and that's where you might spot some chunky, scruffy looking molting penguins hanging out, losing their feathers, having a bit of a grumpy old time under there. And we have 5 minutes left. Gosh, that goes quick. We might try and answer a few more questions before we go. Do you have any more difficult ones or any easier ones for me, Sue?
Do we know if Stumpy stayed into molt?
Oh, I don't know. I haven't seen Stumpy in a while. I know Sky saw him a little while ago, but I didn't see, so I'm not sure if he was looking like he was pre-molt. But Stumpy would definitely be coming back here to molt, and he does live off the Penguin Highway. So I would say that he crosses the beach here at Penguins Plus and heads up the highway. So he will have to molt at some point, so he's probably, I don't know, you have to be quite lucky to see Stumpy. I think he's a little bit shy and he's quite old. I remember hearing about Stumpy when I came to work here, and that was 4 years ago, and it was probably 1.5 to 2 years before I actually saw Stumpy. And I'm here a lot, so you do have to be lucky to see Stumpy, but we do have Stumpy penguins in other areas of the colony as well. If you don't know what Stumpy is, it's a penguin who's missing his foot. So he has a bit of a funny little walk, and but he gets where he needs to go. And we actually have a penguin who's missing his foot who lives over on Shelley's Beach where we run our ultimate tours, and we've seen footprints on another beach in our study area as well, of another stumpy penguin. So I was out counting footprints one day and there was a penguin footprint and then a little circle and a footprint and a little circle, and we were like, what's going on here? It must be a stumpy penguin missing his foot. So it must be a kind of common thing that might happen. But the penguins can survive and they can do well without a foot. The important thing for a penguin is that they have nice, strong flippers, because they need to be able to swim. They need to be able to swim really well and really fast to find food. As long as they can get back to their burrows to breed, they're gonna be fine and they can find food. So a stumpy penguin can survive, and that may happen because they might get. Oh, I'm gonna go to the highway. Sorry. They might get something stuck around their foot. And I know we did see a penguin a few nights ago who had something that looked like a bit of fishing line around his foot, and we've been keeping an eye out for that penguin. And it may not always be fishing line. Sometimes they get caught in natural things like seaweed or grasses, and if they can't get it off and it constricts over time, there's a potential they may lose their foot. But they can often survive that and recover, as long as they can still find food. And that penguin has a funny waddle. Look at him, he's an hourglass figure. You don't often see that kind of shape in a penguin. They're usually a little torpedo or a big round basketball if they are pre-molted. That penguin has a funny little shape, and look at him go. I'll go back to the main camera and see what's going on over here. And we might see if we have another question. Do we have another question, Sue?
Yeah, okay. So would some of the skinnier penguins coming in now already have molted, or would they still be coming up to it?
Yeah, so definitely we would have penguins that have already molted for sure. Because we were seeing molting penguins around January. So there's some penguins that could have molted a good couple months ago. Especially because our breeding season started really early last year. We had penguins with eggs in June last year, which is really early. Usually the breeding season won't start until around August or September. And because they started so early, they finished raising their first clutches really early. And a lot of penguins had second clutches, so they raised one set of chicks and they tried for a second lot. Lots of them fledged their second lots, but if they decided to err on the side of caution, they didn't want to have a second clutch, they could have just finished with their first clutch and then gotten ready for molt. So we could have penguins who molted quite early, and there's certainly a lot of variation. And something that I saw someone ask in the questions a few nights ago when I was on there answering the questions was, do penguins here molt at the same time as penguins in a zoo? And the answer is that it depends on where they live. So even our penguins here and penguins up further north in Western Australia or Sydney, they molt and they breed at different times depending on climatic variations and availability of food, because all these things, breeding, molting, is triggered by environmental cues and hormones and instinct. So if food is really readily available, it doesn't matter what time of year it is. If there's lots of food and the water's warm, the penguins are going to breed. And then when they finish breeding, as food starts to become scarcer and it starts to become a bit cooler, they're going to get triggered to molt. So it really depends on where those penguins are, and the breeding seasons are different in different colonies, and in New Zealand as well. Their breeding seasons are different to our breeding seasons here on Phillip Island. And some penguins have longer breeding seasons and some of them have shorter breeding seasons. So it really does vary. Everything that we tell you here on Live Penguin TV, we're talking about our little penguins here on Phillip Island, and they're the ones that we research, and the ones that we know everything about. Well, not everything, sorry. We are experts on our little penguins. But if you talk to someone who works at another penguin colony, who works at Middle Island, who works at Oamaru, who works in Tasmania, you're going to hear different facts about the penguins, because they are all a little bit different in what they do, when they breed, where they forage, And even those facts like how deep they've been seen diving, how many times they dive will vary depending on what has been studied, what they found. So we do our best to tell you about our little penguins, but it always changes, and anything that we even know about our penguins here is never absolute. It's always it's about this or around that or roughly, because they are wild animals. And anytime we say anything in absolutes, the penguins will prove us wrong. Can almost guarantee that. Has it been 5 minutes, Sue? I think it's probably been more than 5 minutes.
Almost.
Almost? Okay.
Yeah.
That tells me we have a bit of extra time. Maybe we'll go for another question.
Okie dokie.
I'm liking the questions are a bit different.
Have we ever seen an albino penguin?
Oh, we talked about this the other night because we saw penguins with a lot of feather wear. So we saw a penguin with a white head. We've been seeing penguins with white on their backs because their blue feathers have been worn away. And if they haven't molted yet, they're going to look a bit scruffy, and some of them will have white patches. But we have seen an albino penguin. You see them more in captivity because that's where they survive. But our research officer, Paula, did find an albino penguin in one of the natural study sites along the peninsula. And it was a chick that fledged, but I don't think we've seen it since, because in the wild, you don't want to be an albino penguin, unfortunately, because it's a huge disadvantage. You don't have the camouflage that all of these penguins have. So when you're floating on the surface of the water, instead of your blue back blending in with the ocean to protect you from any birds of prey, your white back blending against the blue is going to really stand out, and you're going to be really vulnerable to any predators out at sea. So I do hope that little albino penguin has survived and might come back in a year or two to breed. That would be really cool to see, but unfortunately in the wild, the chances of an albino penguin surviving aren't too great. But that's nature. The fittest penguins survive, and they pass those genes on to the next generation of penguins. So we have a nice, strong, thriving population of little penguins here on Phillip Island. Yes, Stu's just giving me the thumbs up. Because it's sad to think that some penguins might not survive, but that's the reality. And our penguins here are doing really well. They have good seasons and they have poor seasons, and this year has been a really good season with 2 clutches of chicks, lots of nice chunky molting penguins, and if conditions stay good, I know I've said this a couple times, we may even see an autumn breeding attempt, which we had a really good autumn breeding attempt a couple of years ago. So they might try to breed in autumn if conditions are good, or because they had a really good breeding season this year, they might need a bit of a rest. We did have a really good autumn breed one year after we had a poor regular breeding season, and the penguins kind of compensated by breeding a little bit more in autumn. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. But we will start to see a little bit of a decrease in penguin numbers as they do need to spend a bit longer out at sea heading into winter. But it's still really interesting to come and see them. It doesn't matter the time of year. I would recommend coming here at each time of year. Come in winter, come in spring, come in summer, come in autumn. There's always something different happening in the penguin colony. It's always really interesting to see and interesting to compare what they're doing. I definitely never get sick of watching these little penguins come in and cross the beach and seeing all the other wildlife that lives here in the penguin colony. So I really would recommend coming and visiting us when you can. And if you can't, you want to help support our little penguins, you can help us out by donating to the Penguin Foundation. And sadly, tonight will be my last night of hosting for our little UK month of live streams, which has been really fantastic. When we stopped these streams for a little bit, I definitely missed talking to you guys about our penguins every night. So it has been fantastic having these streams back again. And I do hope to see you guys back on live Penguin TV again in the not too distant future. But if you do come visit and you see us out and about, if you're at the Nobbies or the Koalas or Churchill Island or here at the Penguin Parade, we're all out and about. Give us a hug, say hello. We might be a bit taken aback at first because we're not celebrities. We're not used to getting recognised, but we love hearing from people who've been watching and enjoying watching Little Penguins, because we have loved bringing the penguins to you all at home. So I think it's been 5 minutes now.
I think I put you way over time.
That's
Megan.
all right. That's all right. Yeah, so thank you again for tuning in tonight. If you think you've counted how many penguins came in, watch again tomorrow night to find out if you get closest, if you win the Penguin Lotto chocolate. We'll have, what do we have? A couple more nights of our UK live streams before we finish up. So thank you so much for tuning in tonight. Tune in the next few nights to get your dose of penguins, and we hope to see you guys again in the future. Sue, shall we finish with a
Definitely.
hug?
Yeah.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.